A curious byproduct of experiencing the world through the lens of ignorant youth is that some of those snippets seem to naturally revisit us later when we possess the faculties to internalize them. I'm a 2000s kid, and one such snapshot that has revisited me is a phrase that felt like it defined the cultural zeitgeist. Fuck that noise. With the ignorance of youth, the only way I was able to interpret that phrase was literally, which is comical. This was uttered by people who were spending the best of their days listening to loud club music, and ironically, their defining mantra is about ignoring noise? Obviously, it means something else, and just as I mentioned in a previous writing on how we have unfortunately forgotten the meaning behind "it's turtles all the way down," we have also lost the meaning of this phrase to time as well. It just so happens to be that now, more than ever, is a good time to remember. To talk about this something we've lost to time, it's fitting to first detail something that we haven't. Obsession. We are obsessed. We're obsessed with turning obstacles, such as money and power, into goals. We're obsessed with finding excuses for our overindulgences. We're obsessed with acting out the part of the self-actualized person without ever being there. We're obsessed with being told where to go, whether it's our own damnation or a false escape. And it's all because we're afraid of one thing: focus. To have something means the existence of a contrast. You cannot describe elation without depression, nor can you have a subject without a background. Focus is no different. There's no focus without the contrast of noise, and as we've lost that mantra from the 2000s, we've developed an obsession with noise despite always complaining that we lack the opposite. It's such a modern approach to problems as well. No removal, only burial. The Yanks especially. They're great at bulking, but terrible at cutting. Both figuratively and literally. Why remove cars as a disgustingly inefficient component of travel infrastructure when we can lie to ourselves and pile more shit atop it like biofuel and electric vehicles? Why excise fascism from this world when we can bury it under a little more humor, a little more complaining, a little more waiting? Why eat modestly when you can do liposuction, the latest fad diet, or drugs like Ozempic to do the work for you? Why concern yourself with recentering your focus when you can add more noise by doom-scrolling, binge-watching, and otherwise distracting yourself from such worries? We're so inundated with noise that we don't know what focus is. The contrasting outlines have become blurred. What little focus we possess is split between so many different happenings of the modern world simultaneously that its labors bear no fruits. The conclusion I hear time and time again from fresh generations entering this world is that no matter what they try to put their mind to, they just can't get it done. They can't get anywhere. Obviously not. You can't burn an ant on the sidewalk with a kaleidoscope. You need a magnifying glass for that. Similarly, while we are plenty capable of multitasking, we've split ourselves between so many things that an effort does not become an honest effort, yet we count it all the same. Back as a young 2000s kid, I emulated this same behavior with Magic Eye books. They would upset me because I lacked that honest focus. I'd look at them, but not honestly look. And despite not knowing the difference, I'd count my half-assed effort as the same thing, say they don't work for me, get upset, and move on. Nowadays, knowing the game at play, I can literally see what I was missing and enjoy the visuals my previous impatience gated me from. There are many flavors of distraction to keep our focus from being distilled into something akin to a concentrated effort, and the first, as I just gave an example of, is deflection. I considered a half effort the same as a full one and brushed aside something that would have otherwise been simple fun when I was a kid. That said, adults have their own ways of deflecting too. If you tell a conservative about your problems, they're quick to blame immigrants, the liberal elite, woke ideology, or the hot culture war topic of that year. Tell a liberal about your problems, and they'll blame it on bigots, conservatives, or a lack of whatever government program they care most about in that given year. Tell a Christian about your problems, and they'll either judge your faith or pray for you and move on. However, if you tell someone of honest effort and concentrated focus your problems, they don't deflect by telling you who to blame. Rather, they ask a simple question: what can I do to help? People of politics, religion, and the like would benefit from acting as if they lived in a world where neither the state nor God exist, and that when someone comes to you for help, all that is real in that moment are you and your focus. For one who lacks concentrated focus, their interactions with others are filled with deflection because it prevents said focus from being tested nor relied on. Meanwhile, in their personal lives, the capabilities for concentrated focus are minimized with the second flavor of distraction: noise. Just like deflection, nobody is immune to the distraction of noise. Alan Watts, who many Westerners would believe is a perfect example of someone who embodies Zen and thus ability to focus, was not immune either. One of his most troubling flavors of noise was alcohol, and he details this in his book, The Wisdom of Insecurity, A Message for an Age of Anxiety, by saying the following: I am depressed, and I want to get I out of this depression. The opposite of depression is elation, but because depression is not elation, I cannot force myself to be elated. I can, however, get drunk. This makes me wonderfully elated, so when the next depression arrives, I have a quick cure. The subsequent depressions have a way of getting deeper and blacker, because I'm not digesting the depressed state and eliminating its poisons. So I need to get even drunker to drown them. Very soon I begin to hate myself for getting so drunk, which makes me still more depressed. And so it goes. The interesting quality of noise that Alan Watts describes here is that, similar to how society buries rather than removes, noise does the same onto itself. People don't remove noise, they bury it. Alan initially drinks as a quick cure for depression, and when he gets depressed with his drinking problem, the source of the problem turns into the solution. This echoes in online social spaces, where the original purpose of the digital town square has been perverted into a bucket of crabs for a similar self-destruction through noise. If you're part of a community but don't have a finger on the pulse of its drama, you're considered out of touch or a fake fan. If you're an intellectual, perhaps politically or scientifically minded, and consider decreasing your intake of worrying statistics and headlines for the sake of your mental health, you're called ignorant and removed from reality. Even more damning, some might call you privileged for being able to ignore bad news, since vulnerable populations have to live through these things. I can't blame you for being stressed amongst all this. You're not allowed to want silence. The socially acceptable norm is to pile on more noise, and enough of it that you don't think. No removal, only burial. This is highly profitable, both socially and monetarily, for anyone benefiting off of the sunken cost fallacy. Car manufacturers, the petrol industry, centralized social media, legacy news, cultural traditionalists, they've all sunken huge swaths of time, money, and energy into these things they expected to last forever. In their ignorant facades, they all fail to understand the world and the individuals that make it are all constantly changing, and as such, nothing holds permanence. They're deathly afraid of this, and are fighting a losing war against nature, a byproduct of which is plentiful noise that dilutes our focus. We can't throw their old news on the trash heap of history if we're too distracted with their noise to focus on doing so. Noise isn't contentment. It's not compassion. It isn't intellectualism. It's self-destruction. How are you going to get anything done in life if everyone tells you that distracting yourself with noise and suffering alongside them is what actually makes you commendable? My personal privilege affords me the ability to keep a sound mind despite troubling news, but by maintaining that mental clarity, I've kept myself prepared for when those affected come to me for help. I have, through luck of my circumstances, created an excess of time, money, energy, and peace of mind, and in doing so, have provided myself the materials and focus to help those who don't possess adequate amounts of such things. Foolishly, I could delude myself into thinking I require such an excess, but I've seen enough billionaires doing this publicly to know that they're only good at making money, not happiness. There's a flavor of noise for them too. The rich are not somehow smarter than the average person enough to know how to avoid these pitfalls. Elon certainly isn't the only one who surrounds himself with yes men. So to live in this noisy delusion that separates you from the rest of society, thinking that you require your gross opulence enough that the horrid things you do for it are entirely just, it defies another rule of nature. The act of creation is a social one, and more than just dodging taxes to avoid financially contributing to it, the rich socially isolate themselves so as not to contribute to the communal aspect of creation either. And so it goes that the rich alienate themselves from the common person, and the commoners dilute their focus with bread and circuses. Rich or poor, doesn't matter. Everyone is being subdued by noise that disables them from making meaningful social contributions to the ongoing communal acts of creation and evolution. This way of living didn't always stand uncontested. Fuck that noise was part of the counterculture of the 2000s, and exists as a fun piece of social rebellion. The best analog to such a phrase is the German expression, doch. Maybe someone said your favorite football team sucks, or that you're not a real hobbyist, or some other equally annoying claim. And instead of wasting the time to argue, you just say, doch, as a proclamation of disagreement. It's fun, it saves a bunch of hassle, and it demonstrates that such disagreements are below you. Fuck that noise is no different. Instead of going on a whole rant about why you don't do community drama or why you need to take a break from the news, you just say, fuck that noise. You don't owe every single annoying person an explanation. Before they're done asking, hey, have you heard about the recent blah blah blah, you've shooed them off. You've called it what it is, noise, and have shown it to be beneath you in that moment. You're not letting yourself be dragged back down into the bucket of crabs. In this way of acting, you've respected yourself enough to acknowledge that your own mental well-being is worth being a bit of an asshole for. Being capable of muting the noise is a lesson you'll have to learn, because this isn't something that we can wait out. Noise is an infinite resource vomiting out of many origins, And in the present convenience economy, people rather choose the convenient option of piling on noise for the chance to cancel out troubling thoughts temporarily than to inconveniently minimize noise to achieve a lasting mental serenity. They're choosing, as Alan Watts did, to take in more noise because properly digesting their depressions and keeping a clear mind to stay course is much more difficult. This isn't to say that people don't try. It's become a bit of a trend on the internet for people to heavily limit or even remove their usage of social media apps, along with regulating their consumption from sources of noise like the news, and by sharing their experiences, serve as examples of the rewards of these endeavors. Sure, an app or other tool can do some of this work for you, but this process still requires the strength to stop accepting new forms of noise in times of weakness, and to tell its harbingers, fuck that noise, before they get the chance to instill it upon you. If you want serenity enough, if you really want it, then these practices will more than prove their worth over time. When patterns are broken, new worlds emerge.